24 hours, the Illinois State House passed a bill that changes election law. Republicans say it subverts democracy and isn't a slap in the face of Illinois voters. And the governor, he's indicating that he'll sign it. So what's going on here? Welcome back, Bishop on Air. I'm Greg Bishop. My full-time gig, be sure to check out the Center Square, where we cover everything you need to know of what's going on at the Illinois State House. All right, thecentersquare.com. And just some of the headlines you'll see. Corrections director grilled over prison safety and closures. A year after guilty verdicts, there's no sentence in sight for the ComEd leaders. You've also got the Chicago Bears continuing their meeting with the Pritzker administration and legislators about what's going on with the proposal for a nearly $5 billion stadium, and so much more. So go check out thecentersquare.com, and also be sure to donate. All right, it's a nonprofit newswire service, so I keep my full-time gig if you guys help donate there, and that keeps us on the ground in Springfield to watch what's going on at the State House. So go check it out. Also, don't forget, Fridays, we have a weekly review of what's going on. It's called Illinois in Focus. So check that out. And that comes out about 9 o'clock on Friday mornings. But at the State House this week, they had committee deadlines to get Senate bills out of House committees. And in the Senate, they had House bills they had to get out of Senate committees. So the Senate, they have canceled session for today. I believe they are, moving some deadlines around. They're back on Tuesday. The House is in session today. But earlier this week, the House, they took a Senate bill that had already passed the Senate, and it was in the House. The House amended that Senate bill. The Senate bill dealt with child welfare services, the Department of Children and Family Services, but with an amendment. They brought it out on Wednesday, had a committee hearing, not in an elections committee, but in an executive committee. But the bill dealt with elections, and they passed the amendment out of committee. They gutted and replaced the DCFS bill with a bill about elections. They then brought it up in the House hours later. Republicans protested, voted present, and walked off the floor, held a news conference, and talked about how this omnibus bill, a bill that contains a whole bunch of things, meaning omnibus, it dealt with three non-binding resolutions. One deals with questions about property taxes. One deals about questions of reproductive access. Another deals with protecting election workers. Three non-binding resolutions that would go in front of statewide voters in November. Some say that that's a measure that Democrats want to try to bring people out to the polls. But there's something else going on with this election omnibus bill that has people scratching their head. And we'll hear some of the comments from the Senate after yesterday's action. But in the House Wednesday, they passed this hours after gutting and replacing the bill. From all accounts, this kind of came out of nowhere. Hadn't seen any conversations of these things in the House Elections and Ethics Committee. They've been focused on, other issues. And then you have the side issue of bringing about ranked choice voting, which we've talked about. So they've kind of had that over there. But then all of a sudden, this comes out of nowhere Wednesday to change election law. What they did is they're essentially saying that for the primary, if a candidate is not running in a established party, then they cannot slate themselves into that spot heading into November. So quick background on Illinois election law. We, this year, election year, have a primary. That was in March. And then in November, you have the general election, and that's where you've got, the Republican candidates and their delegates and local races and what. That's for all the marbles, right? The November election. But in March, Illinois taxpayers pay for the Democrats and the Republicans to have primaries, private party primaries. All right. Libertarians, Green Party, Communist Party, whatever. They are not considered established parties in Illinois, so they can't take part in that private party primary that's taxpayer funded. Okay. So, criticism, aside, people can look at the primary process in Illinois and make their own conclusions. But other states have caucuses that are funded by the parties. And they caucus, and they don't necessarily have to worry about the taxpayer funds. But you have other primary type of options that are closed and open. Either way, you can look at the different types of primary and caucus processes in different states. Illinois, you have to meet a certain threshold the general election before you can be considered an established party. So the Republicans and Democrats are established. Taxpayers pay for their private party primaries, and that was in March. If, as we saw, with more than half of the state house seats that were the party was already decided, right? There are dozens of state house seats up for grabs where only a Democrat ran in the primary. Sometimes that Democrat was unopposed by another Democrat in the primary. In the Republican field, there was nobody running in the primary. So no Republicans sought to take, the primary ballot spot. It happened also for Republican districts. There were Republican districts where only a Republican ran in the primary. There was no Democrat that ran against a Democrat in the primary. So after a primary, Illinois law allows for the local established party committees to slate a candidate heading into the November election. So they don't have to take part in the primary. All right. You can criticize that all day long, but here we are now in the process for an election year. We've already had the primary, and now we've got the November election coming up. And in comes this bill to say, all right, in the middle of an election cycle, we're going to tell the private party, Democrat and Republican, you can't slate a candidate between the primary and November under certain circumstances. So that's really the gist of it, right? And it came out Wednesday, amended a DCFS bill. They rush it through the House, Republicans protest, and then yesterday, less than 24 hours from when the bill was amended and passed, the Senate goes ahead and votes for it. We'll hear a little bit of that Senate action, and then again, you can go and check out thecentersquare.com, read the story. Illinois Democrats approve changes to election law in less than 24 hours. Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked about this at a stop in Normal, if he'll support the bill, and here's what he had to say.
Well, as I understand that bill, and again, it just got put through, I think, yesterday, and I haven't seen the details of it. But as I understand, this is actually an ethics bill. It really does make sure that we don't have backroom deals to put people on the ballot and run as a result of some small group of people in a smoke-filled room making the choice. So I think, to me, more transparency is better.
But people will say transparency. This thing was brought out of nowhere without true public vetting for the public to digest what was in it. And the arguments were also that, well, listen, nobody's slated any candidates yet. I've got intel that says there are candidates that are being slated for those spots where the party didn't have anybody in the primary. So in the middle of an election cycle, right? So it's just it's fascinating to watch this all at the Illinois State House and on the Senate floor. Again, you can see this at thecentersquare.com. State Senator Erica Harris said that this just encompasses all that people are frustrated with when it comes to Illinois politics.
This bill was filed yesterday. Yesterday. It's not a stretch to say that very little time for public vetting of this proposal, nor any real discussion of its significant issues have been discussed among legislators. It's a slap in the face to the concept of democracy, and it's just shameful and blatant political power grab.
And others got up and said that this is meant to secure the Democratic supermajority by saying that if you didn't put a Republican in the primary, then the Democrats is going to walk into victory. And arguing that it's unethical, especially in the middle of an election. Senate Minority Leader John Curran sharing these thoughts on the Senate floor.
It's also a slap in the face to voters that one of the ballot questions you've included is about election interference when that's exactly what this legislation does. Think about that for a minute. You're saying you're afraid of competition and you do anything to gain one more seat, one more advantage in November. Are Illinois Democrats so grossly, unabashedly obsessed with increasing power at all costs that you're willing to change our election system for a better chance of picking up one or two seats? Is that what we've come to?
So the arguments on the Senate floor didn't sway anybody from voting one way or the other. Republicans voted present. Senate President Don Harmon, who sponsored the amendment to the Senate bill that passed the House and now is back on the Senate for concurrence, before passing it, he said, listen, this is the best way to go, according to Democrats.
What we have here before us is an opportunity to end a corrosive practice where strategically people avoid primaries to see what the lay of the land is and then pick the candidate best suited for November after the primary has been settled on the other side. It's not would I do it this way at this time if left to my druthers? No, but this is an opportunity to end a practice that has been abused. And I want to emphasize, we're not taking this away from Republicans, we're taking this away from everybody. We Democrats won't be able to slate candidates for the Senate in any districts where your members are running unopposed.
So the Democrats and Republicans, if the governor signs this bill, which he's indicated he is in favor of it, again, we can go back to the comments he made yesterday about this bill.
Well, as I understand that bill, and again, it just got put through, I think, yesterday, and I haven't seen the details of it. But as I understand, this is actually an ethics bill. It really does make sure that we don't have backroom deals to put people on the ballot and run as a result of some small group of people in a smoke-filled room making the choice. So I think, to me, more transparency is better.
So the governor indicating that he may sign this thing. We'll watch that closely. Heck, it could be sent to him. He could sign it today. So we'll see what ultimately happens with that measure. But some questioning, why not wait until after the November election to address this issue? Why change this midstream? For all the criticism there may be about election law, they start with a set of rules at the beginning of an election year, and you expect those rules to play out through the rest of the election year. So we'll watch this space, see what happens. Surely there's going to be some litigation if this thing ultimately comes through. The timing of this, interesting as well. But maybe this also, it'll shine a spotlight on the third-party options that Illinois has. Maybe there's Republicans that'll say, you know what, I'm just going to run as a libertarian, get on the ballot. Because those third parties, those non-established parties, libertarian, green, conservative, communist, whatever the party name is, they can get on the ballot. They have a higher signature threshold to get on the ballot. But those are still things that can happen before November. Those non-established parties can still get on the ballot. So we'll have to take a look at that sometime in the future. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. The Illinois General Assembly back in session with the Senate today. Next week, both chambers back full bore to the end of May for them to pass a budget, for them to deal with whatever the Bears want to do, for them to deal with a whole host of other priorities. We shall see what they put together, all right? So stay with Bishop on Air. Go to thecentersquare.com and subscribe to the newsletter, get the podcast, and stay plugged in, all right? It is Bishop on Air. Greatly appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning. So you guys fuel my fire. Appreciate that.